Hey guys, guess what? It's a new month, which means we're getting closer to hockey season. All right, I am back once again, and I know you guys got pre recorded content for the month of August, but I feel refreshed and I'm ready to go as we inch closer to the debut of the Carolina Hurricanes 2025-26 season. I am excited. And I do have quite a few things actually to share with you guys about. And one of them is obviously the great partnership I have with SeatGeek. You get $20 off of your first purchase if you use promo code Caniac Reports, all one word. It is a great deal if you're trying to save money on some seats. And I actually might have used it for an upcoming concert in January at Lenovo. For those of you that do not know, I am a bit of a Rascal Flats fan, so I will be going to that concert. And if you're going to that concert too and you're trying to get tickets, hey, great opportunity right there. Obviously, there are other concerts probably in your area if you're not living in the Raleigh area. So I will just keep an eye out for stuff that you're interested in and see if you can use that promo code. Another thing too is if you guys did not notice, with the episodes that were released in the month of August, you probably noticed that there wasn't really a DraftKings ad. Well, DraftKings is back for this upcoming season. So, for those of you who love to gamble, you can use promo code THPN. Uh, and obviously, there's more detail in that with the ad that I'll be playing in the midsection of obviously these upcoming episodes for this upcoming season. And another thing too is for those of you who do follow the Caniac Report, whether it's on X, Instagram, Blue Sky, whatever, you probably saw that I released a video earlier this week on open auditions. And it was a bit of a small video. It's about like I think around a minute and 20 something seconds. But I do kind of want to expand on that. As I think probably some people might have, well, I guess I probably could have communicated better, but regardless, basically, if you are interested or if you know someone that's interested in wanting to break into the sports world and love the Hurricanes, I would advise you to send an email to the Caniac Report at gmail.com and to say, hey, you are interested. And I'm going to make it very clear because I don't think I made it clear in my little mini episode, or sorry, little mini video that I sent, in the fact that the deadline to submit an interest email is September the 12th, which is a week from this episode being released. So there's going to be auditions, obviously. Already do have a couple people interested. But again, if you want to break into the sports world or if you know anybody, really anybody, I am accepting auditions. I'm considering, obviously, of trying to bring on a co host. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So we'll see how it goes. So that's kind of it for the month of September. And I'll give you guys a bit of a preview here in the fact that this is a month like previous years where it's going to be a lot of episodes of predictions. So I think it's going to be fun. Next week, you guys are going to be getting obviously Monday and Friday's episodes. They're going to be geared toward NHL standing predictions because they're fun and I enjoy doing them. And the week after, you guys will be getting an analysis of the Metro Division because if you look at the DNA of the schedule, teams that we verse the most are the teams that are in our division. And also, I just want to let you guys know if you are watching on YouTube, I actually got a new jersey 22, which is Stankoven. Monday was my birthday, so my parents gave me the Stankoven jersey. And I do thank my parents for that. You guys have probably heard my dad on for a few episodes in the past. So I do want to thank them. So yeah, and you know what? Quite a bit of news since the last episode that contained news, which was back in July. So I'm kind of going to break this down, even though I do kind of want to get to the big news stuff first. And obviously, I'm going to be talking about things happening around the league. There were a couple of extensions that did happen. Winnipeg extended Sandberg to a 3-year extension at $5.75 million contract, who is a big defenseman that can be a good shutdown defenseman. That's how he plays. And the Winnipeg Jets signed him to, or extended him, I should say, a 3-year, $5.75 million contract. And the LA Kings extended Alex Lafreniere, who I think is a very good young player for them, to a 3-year extension at $4.1 million. I think this is a guy who's very, very fast, and I think he has a very, very good shot. And obviously, to me, this doesn't come to no surprise at all. The New York Islanders did sign their number one overall pick from this past draft in Matthew Schaefer to an entry-level contract. And another tidbit of NHL news is that those who like to play the NHL games, well, Matthew Tkachuk is on the cover of NHL 26. That's going to be coming out within, I believe, the next week or so. That really, honestly, doesn't surprise me. Matthew Tkachuk, obviously, huge part of the Florida Panthers team who won the Stanley Cup. So, not surprising at all. And then there is the big news. And this was released very, very recently. And it's very, very important because it does apply to the Hurricanes. But the NHL made some big decisions. And it's going to start not this season, but the next season. And the fact that the NHL season is going to start a bit earlier. It's going to start in late September instead of early October. Preseason games are going to be shortened. Thank goodness. I have been a proponent of this. I think right now there's just too many preseason games, and I just think more regular season games, the better. And that is what is going to happen as well. As 82 games is going to go to 84 games in the regular season. And I actually really do like these new rules. And with the regular season starting a bit earlier, it's obviously going to end with the Stanley Cup winner being announced probably in mid-June. So again, that's big news. It was announced very, very recently, and we'll see how the Hurricanes do. They're Hurricanes, I have no doubt. I still think they're going to be a successful team, even with 84 games. It's just 2 extra games. Nothing very, very big, but again, it's not just the Hurricanes that this applies to, it applies to all the other teams in the league. So that's kind of it for stuff around the league in terms of news for this episode specifically, because I am kind of going to be breaking it down from the past month of no news in the episodes. Now I'm going to get to some Hurricanes news. Again, lots of Hurricanes news since the last episode. So again, I'm kind of breaking it down, but there is a big piece of news that I will discuss for the Hurricanes at the end. You guys probably know because of the reveal that came very, very recently. And the player that I do want to talk about that has got a few headlines, especially this past month, is Jacob Slavin. He is invited to the U.S. Men Olympic Camp. And Seth Jarvis is invited for Canada's Olympic Camp. And I am very excited to see both of these players already being invited. I think obviously it's a no-brainer, I would say, for both players. Both players are excellent. And I do think both those players have a very, very good shot of making the Olympic team. So it's going to be awesome. Obviously, the Olympics is in February. So If they do make it, obviously we will see them. And I'm telling you, I think Jacob Slavin, when it comes to the Olympics, I mean, he already played good in Four Nations. He's going to be playing excellent again, I would say, when it comes to the actual Olympics. And I think Seth Jarvis, I think he can play very, very good. I think the one thing probably Jacob Slavin has in terms of, I think when it comes to like Seth Jarvis, that he probably doesn't have, and again, I think it probably could be debated here, is the fact that Seth Jarvis, I think, has a lot more competition than the likes of Jacob Slavin does on Team US. Because you look at Team Canada, I mean, the forward group is freaking loaded. It really is. So, obviously, I do think Seth Jarvis does get into games, but I do think the competition probably is going to be a bit harder for Jarvis than it is for an a guy like Jacob Slavin, who is already an established defensive defenseman in this league. And another thing, too, again, this doesn't really involve with the Hurricanes, but I did want to talk about it in the fact that Tom Dundon, he bought out the Portland Trail Blazers for over $4 billion. Again, I am not a basketball fan. I'm just not. That's just how I live. But we'll see how Dundon does with the Trailblazers. I mean, I think handling a hockey team is probably a bit different than handling a basketball team because I really think just the two leagues are kind of a bit different. I've always thought the NBA is just, again, I don't watch the NBA. I really don't. But from what I hear, obviously the NBA is controlled by its stars, whereas the NHL is more controlled by obviously the owners. But I think if you just look at the style of play, I would argue the NHL is more of a team oriented sport than the NBA. Again, I'm not saying I'm an expert of watching the NBA. I am not. But that's just how I feel just from what I've been hearing. So pretty cool to see Tom Dundon buying the Trailblazers, but obviously he is still the owner of the Hurricanes. And another thing too, I am going to go back to Jacob Slavin again because I thought this was really cool as well. And the fact that he was ranked number 8 on the NHL Network's top 20 defensemen. And honestly, just looking at the defensemen above him, I mean, could he be higher? Probably, but I don't think that's a bad pick for him at number 8. I think I have seen a lot worse. I've probably, in fact, I would say I know I have seen a lot worse because I have seen some rankings of top defensemen in the NHL, and Slavin is outside the top 10, which I would say, honestly, that is ridiculous. Have you seen Jacob Slavin play? So, number 8, I don't think is bad, but do I think he could be higher? Yes. I, but I do think part of the fact, you look at the defenseman above him, they get a lot more points, and obviously that weighs into the consideration of top defensemen when it comes to just the NHL network and just media in general. That's just the fact. And the last thing I do want to talk about, obviously, is the big reveal that the Hurricanes made yesterday. As I am recording this, I am recording this on a Thursday, in the fact that they've revealed new away jerseys. And I know there are Hurricane fans that either love them or hate them or mid on them. I am one of those Canes fans where I dig it. I really, really love it. I really, really do. And my, I don't really have much of a reasoning. And listen, if you're a Hurricanes fan and you don't like this, that is completely fine. Same thing I would say if I hate it on the jersey and there are Canes fans that love it. So honestly, it's just to me an opinion based thing. And One thing I will say about the jersey, the reason why I love it is because I think if you look at the Hurricanes' previous away jersey, to me, it's just, again, this is my opinion. I just think it's a little bit too original with just the Canes diagonal wording on it. So, again, that's just my opinion. I'm not going to harp on anyone who hates it, who loves it, but I will say I love it. And I really do. To me, the best part, I would say, about the new away jerseys, I know I might get some flack on this, but again, I really love it. Is the fact that they took the logo from the outdoor game that the Hurricanes played onto basically the white jersey, and I just think it looks so clean. Again, I love it. I really, really do. But I know there are some Canes fans probably that just don't like it. And you know what? That is completely fine. So that's kind of it for news around the league. I do have a question before we get to our DraftKings ad that someone asked me over the break. So I'm going to answer that. And then I am going to come up with the big questions heading into this upcoming season. And that's going to be it for the episode. But before we get to the question and obviously the questions surrounding the Hurricanes, let's get to our sponsor. NFL fans, week 1 is your shot to play free and stack $1 million cash bag with DraftKings Pick 6, an official partner of the NFL. Here's how. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app, DraftKings' easiest way to play fantasy. Enter for free and pick more or less on 6 player stats for week 1. Share your link with friends to add more cash to the bag and get bonus shots to win. It's all 6 picks, and you'll be splitting a bag that's already at $1 million or more. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app, use code THPN, opt in for free, and start stacking entries for NFL Week 1. Zero cost, huge upside in partnership with DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. Must claim token for free entry in Bag Builder contest. Only perfect entries earn share of cash prize. Tokens are single use and expire September 8th at 8:15 p.m. Eastern. Terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos. All right. So, back in August, during my break, I received a question via email, thecanakreport@gmail.com. And I loved it. I loved the great question. And shout out to Philip Kolb who emailed this question. And yes, I'm going to answer it right here, right now. His question is: do you foresee any roster spots amongst the forwards through training camp? If so, who do you think doesn't get dressed or gets waived or demoted? Philip Kolb, I think that is an excellent question. I really do. Unfortunately, I think if you look at this team's roster, though, heading into training camp, I think it is going to be very, very challenging for someone, even a Bradley Nadeau type of player, to crack into this team. And I do think that if there is a player that does crack into the lineup of this Hurricanes team, the amount is, I think, only going to be one rookie. Now, you never know. Obviously, if you remember heading into last season, there was a player in Jackson Blake that's obviously exploded out of nowhere. Like he just impressed Brittamore so much to where the point where Brittamore was like, I gotta put him into the roster for this Hurricanes team because he's that good. So we might get a player like that, but I just don't think we're going to have a player like that just because of how loaded we are on the roster. But I will say, if we get someone like a Bradley Nadeau that makes the team, again, And this is not me hating on the player. It really isn't. It's just the fact that if we have another forward crack into the roster, there's going to have to be a trade. I truly think there's going to have to be. But obviously, the decision's not mine. It is management. And again, this is my speculation on this. I do think a guy like KK would probably be more on the move than he probably is now. And I also speculate too about KK when it comes to this. It's a bit of a side ramble here, but I do wonder if KK is going to start on the second line this upcoming season. I don't I like that feeling. I really don't, but I could see it. And if he's to me, if he is the second line center come playoff time, listen, I love the Hurricanes. I really do. I hope they win the Stanley Cup, and that, in fact, that's going to be one of the questions. Obviously, once I get into the Hurricanes here, but if he is your second line center, K KK, man, like I can't see it because he's had 3 years, 3 consecutive years of trying to be that second line center, and it just hasn't worked out. So if he is your second line center, I don't see the Hurricanes winning the Stanley Cup. I just don't. I'm sorry. I just don't see it. But obviously, just on the question, the follow up question, he obviously says, if so, who do you think doesn't get dressed or gets waived or demoted? Obviously, I think the obvious person will probably be Mark Jankowski, just because, I mean, if you compare Mark Jankowski to KK, I do think at points, KK, when he's playing at his worst, there are times where I think Jankowski can be better. But if KK is playing at a 30-point production rate, he's going to be in the lineup over Mark Jankowski. He just is. And I know there is some debate amongst Hurricane fans, and I would say probably amongst Hurricane insiders or people that are in full-time reporting position on the Hurricanes on who KK actually is. I think KK is more of a bottom six type of centerman. I know there is a difference between a bottom six centerman and a top nine centerman. I do not view him as a top nine centerman. I view him as more of a bottom six centerman. But again, that's where the debate lies if you talk to probably any Hurricanes fan. So hopefully I answered your question, Philip Kolb. And thank you for asking that question. And if you're listening to this and you want to ask a question as well, feel free to DM me, send an email. The email and the social media links are both in the description of this episode. And also, another thing, too, if you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you never miss another episode. And if you are listening on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts, please leave a rating and a review. It really does help me out. So now I'm going to get to the last part, obviously, that I talked about. And the questions heading into the Hurricanes this season. I think there's quite a bit just because there's a mixture of new players. There's a few players that came onto this team in the last season that I think there are questions on. And there's obviously questions on the Hurricanes just in general. So I first decided to kind of go from the bottom to the top, basically from the goalies to the forwards in terms of the questions. And the first question that I have, I would say probably for this team heading into this upcoming season is, are we going to get the same type of goalie in Kochekov that we had this past season? Because if you look at Kochekov this past season, he's a roller coaster of a goalie. He can be very, very good, but he can also be very, very bad. And unfortunately for him, Kochekov kind of ended on a disastrous note in the playoffs. He wasn't good. Anderson had to come in while Kochetkov was playing because if you guys remember, I believe it was in game 4 where Anderson got hit by one of the Devils players. I can't remember the name of the Devil player that hit him, but Kochetkov had to come in, and he wasn't playing at his best. He really wasn't. So I do think it's fair to say that Kochetkov, there are serious questions with him. There really is. His potential is great. It's just there are games where he just lets in a lot of bad goals, and there are games where I'm like, dude, this is what you can be. If you can be like that, you could beat out Anderson. You really could as the starting goalie. Now, obviously, Brendan Moore, he doesn't do starting goalies. He does mostly tandems, which I get. But if Kochetkov played at his potential, I think he can be a true starting goalie. He really can. So that's going to be a question, I think, heading into this season. The next question is another question on the goalies in the fact of can Anderson or Kochetkov be the goalie we need come playoff time? And I think with Anderson, I think he can. Now, here's the thing when it comes to Anderson, he played, I think, really, really good this past playoffs. I don't think you blame him for the elimination of the Hurricanes by the Panthers. I think it was just more of a team collapse in front of Anderson. Now, you look 2 years ago when we got eliminated by the Rangers, he was letting in bad goals. So with Anderson, well, I think he is a very good goalie come being healthy time. I do think there is somewhat of a verdict to where can he be a true starting goalie based on his history? Because again, you look at that Rangers series where we got eliminated 2 years ago. I mean, he was not covering the post correctly on most of those goals, and you need to. You need to. So it's just one of those things where can Anderson be it? I have more confidence in Anderson pulling that off than I do with Kochetkov, obviously. But Anderson, if he can be that good, solid beast mode Anderson, like kind of what we had against the Devils and the Capitals, then we definitely can win a Stanley Cup. And there have been teams who have won Stanley Cup in the past, which I do know that did not have probably the big name goalies like the Bobrovskis, like the Shesterkins. I think a great example is Aiden Hill from Vegas. He was nobody, and yet he won a Stanley Cup with Vegas. So I think you need to have really good goaltending, but you can't have bad goaltending in order to win a Stanley Cup. And I think if you have great goaltending, I don't think that is an absolute necessity. Again, you just need to have good goaltending. If you kind of look at the track record of past Stanley Cup winners. So that's kind of my ramble on the whole goalie situation. The next questions are on the defense now, because I do think the defense is interesting. So obviously, I think a big question is how are the defensive pairs going to shake out? There is a lot of speculation whether Jacob Slavin's going to be playing on his offside, whether Gostisbehere is going to be playing on his offside. I have my own opinion. I honestly think because you do have a rookie in Nikishin, that is the reality right now. Now, obviously, coming out of season, I think he's totally capable of blowing us out of the water. But right now, he's the rookie. And because of that, I think it'd be a great benefit to have a player like Jalen Chatfield play next to him. But it's going to be interesting. Really, who plays on their offside? That is the big question. And this defensive core right here is not the type of defensive core that we've seen for several years under Brendan Moore. Brendan Moore has options. So it really, really makes things interesting. And the next question I have here is what will Keandre Miller be like in his first season as a Hurricane? And for those of you who did not listen, I was on a Rangers podcast a week or two ago. And I can tell you, those Rangers fans, they were not, they did not like Keandre Miller this past season. But they did say at the same time, when we faced them in the playoffs, Miller was probably the best player, or at least the best defenseman against us. So there obviously is potential there. They do see some Brady Shea qualities in Keandre Miller, and we do have a history of New York Rangers defensemen, and this includes Tony DeAngelo as well, where we turn them into a very, very good defenseman. So with that history and knowing how the Hurricanes can do, I think Miller obviously probably going to take 20 games because this takes time, obviously, to play under Brind'Amour system. I think Keandre Miller can be a very, very good defenseman. I'll just say the same thing that I said on the Rangers podcast. I am cautiously optimistic about Keandre Miller, especially because of the contract that we signed him. Is that a bad contract? I don't think it is. Just if you look at it from a salary cap perspective, but I think if you look at it from a performance perspective, I do think there is some risk to that because you look at all the contracts, I think, on the Hurricanes, I think there is a very good argument to be like, what's the one contract that you're most concerned with? And if people say Keandre Miller, I can see why. It's a big contract. It's 8 years, 7.5 million. I can understand why there might be some Hurricane fans looking at that contract and be like, I hope this pans out. And I hope it pans out too, because if he can be that Brady Shea type of player, that contract is a bargain of a contract. But if he plays a defenseman kind of like the defenseman that we've had that didn't work out, again, I'm not trying to be like he's going to be those players, but we've had defensemen that didn't really work out here. I mean, to me, I think a good example is Jake Gardner. If you guys remember him when he was on this team, just did not work out. So I do think the key thing in order to thrive under Brind'Amour system as a defenseman is being able to skate. Because if you cannot skate, you cannot play Brind'Amour system. And Keandre Miller is known to be a very, very good skater. So that's one advantage that he does have. But I'm not going to say that's going to make him alone be successful as a Hurricanes player. So the next question I have here is how will Nikishkin progress through his first full season here? And now I did have a standalone episode with Nikishkin that is way more in depth. So if you want to listen to the more in depth version, I recommend you going back to that episode. But my opinion here, this is kind of the Cliff Notes version of that episode, is I think Nikishkin is, again, a lot like Miller. It's going to take time. Now, he did play, unlike Miller, he did play a few playoff games. There were some great ones, some bad ones. But regardless, he was kind of thrown into the fire. And we finally get to see a good sample size this upcoming season of him playing a full season as a Hurricane. And I think organizationally, like the Tom Dundons, Don Waddell's, I think they kind of view him as a core piece as the future of this Hurricanes team. But again, we've had defensemen before that have not really panned out to be their potential. So again, kind of like Keandre Miller, cautious optimism. But I wouldn't say it's as cautious as the Keandre Miller situation because I do think Nikishin has more star potential than Keandre Miller is. And I think everybody would agree with that. So the next question, again, this is a question on the defense, and that is, will Mike Riley be able to be reliable when called upon? And I think that's a good question to ask because you look at this past season, I know there was salary cap issues. I understand that. But Ty Smith was technically the Mike Riley of this season. He was kind of the seventh defenseman. And you could argue Scott Morrow was at points, especially in the playoffs. Nikishin, sort of at points. And while those defensemen like Scott Morrow and Nikishin weren't bad, I mean, Ty Smith, no, he's to me, he is not a good, reliable player to be obviously a third pairing defenseman. So I think Mike Riley is definitely an upgrade. But listen, it's an 82 game season. You're going to have injuries. If Mike Riley enters into the lineup, he needs to make it to where we don't miss the player that's hurt, miss him a ton, basically. Is the point I'm trying to make there. So Mike Riley, I think, is an upgrade. It's just, can he kind of, I'm not saying he needs to replace the player that we lost on the blue line. He just needs to shore up the gap there, not make us miss the player that's out a ton. Make him the player to where we think, okay, yeah, we're good. We have good insurance. So the next question I have, and this is going to be on the forwards here, obviously, is what is the lineup going to be for the Hurricanes? Because I can tell you this, another top question is obviously who is going to be that second line center. And you know what? That is my next question: is who will be the Hurricanes? Who will the Hurricanes pick as their second line center? That's the better question to phrase it. And there are arguments. Obviously, Brind'Amour did say in a recent interview that he does not want Jarvis to be a second line center. So we'll see how that goes, because obviously Jarvis is kind of limited because Brind'Amour is the coach and he makes those decisions. I think it's probably going to be between Stankoven and KK. And I really hope, and I think he can be, that it's going to be Stankoven as our second line center. Is he small? Yes. But I think Stankoven can do it, especially if you have big forwards with him, like Andrei Svechnikov, like a Taylor Hall. Now, obviously, Taylor Hall doesn't play a mean games, but at least he's big and he can somewhat protect Stankoven. Now, I'm not saying Stankoven needs to be protected. He plays like he's 6'4" on the ice, but it's just nice to have those big players on the wings if Stankoven's going to be playing center. That's all. And the next question I have is, let's say if KK and Stankoven don't work as the second line center, do the Hurricanes get a second line center by the trade deadline? And I think the odds of them picking up a second line center at the trade deadline is a little bit higher, obviously, than it is right now. And I think, obviously, as it heads towards training camp and the start of the regular season. But another thing I do want to say is the fact that there are lots of teams out in the league, it's not just us, that are desperate for a second line center. There really is. So the competition to get one is going to be tough. It's going to take a lot of assets to get one. So I guess probably another question, or maybe a better question, is, are the Hurricanes willing to give up the price to get a second line center? Knowing Tulski, knowing the big trade they pulled off with Rantanen, I think he can. But again, it's going to be a big cost because lots of teams are looking for a second line centers. And it's not like there's one available. There just isn't. So the next question that I have here is Stankoven. Will Stankoven's first full season with the Hurricanes, what will that be like? And I do think, and I'm going to tie this in with Jackson Blake as well. Now, the difference between the two players, Jackson Blake had a full season with the Hurricanes. Stankoven did not. He obviously got traded here in January, around the midpoint of the season last season. But I do think part of the Hurricanes probably winning the Stanley Cup is Stankoven and Blake's uh, point production should probably go up. So again, you have the addition of Ehlers along with the potential of both Stankoven and Blake showing more on the ice this upcoming season. I mean, that can go a long way. It really can. So Stankoven and Blake, I do think they take a bit of a step in terms of point production. I still think they are very, very good players. I think we saw that. Obviously, this past season, when it comes to Blake, was a revelation of how good he can be. This season, I do think there is some pressure both on Stankoven and Blake, not much, but some, in the fact that we've seen their potential. Can they take that next step? And I do think they can. I really do. I think they're that talented. And the next question, obviously, is on Ehlers. And that question is how much of an impact will Ehlers have on this team? And I think he's going to have a big impact, especially if he's going to be playing on a first line with Aho. I really do. So I think that question can I think if you're to answer that confidently, I think you can answer that with a confident yes. So it's going to be fun. I will admit, out of all the players that we got this past offseason, I think Ehlers is, the, to me, the player that I'm most excited to see in a Hurricanes jersey. And it really is nice getting a player like Ehlers because, one, he was the biggest free agent market player, and we got him. And second, he is a top 6 forward that I wouldn't say we need because he is a winger, but you cannot turn down skill, and he has tons of it. And obviously, the last question here, this is a no-brainer type of question, and is can the Hurricanes win the Stanley Cup this season? I absolutely think that they can. I think probably the better question is will they? And that's when you'll have those questions of, oh, they're not. Oh, they are. Now, obviously, I do think the biggest team that they're going to need to go through, and I would not be shocked if they played them again, is the Florida Panthers. And do I think they've closed the gap on the Florida Panthers? I don't think they have, but the way I see it when it comes to that gap is I think when it comes to comparing those two teams, I think if you look at the start of the offseason, there was a bid gap between the Hurricanes and Florida. I think with the additions and hopefully with Blake and Stankoven taking the next step, I do think that gap gets probably a little bit closer to Florida's, but not there. Just because Florida, I mean, what they're creating right now is a dynasty. They are the best team in the NHL. So, can the Hurricanes win it? I absolutely think they can. I think their chances of winning it go up significantly higher if, let's say, Florida does get eliminated in the playoffs, because we know they're going to make the playoffs. We know they are. If they somehow get eliminated before we face them, that's going to be a huge benefit for the Hurricanes. I really do think it is. So that's it for this episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Next week is going to be standing predictions. So it's going to be very, very fun. And I will see you guys next time.